Hello, this is National Chess Master Rats logged in at chess.com, and this is my first video blog for a new series. We're entitled to have blogs at chess.com, and I haven't made one yet, so I think it's time to get one started. And I'm going to cover a couple of topics in this first video blog. One will be the opening, the Qa4 defense to the Queen's Gambit declined. Another one will be on a topic of chess and aging. And there's been some very interesting articles printed here at chess.com by International Master Jeremy Silman. I invite you to track those down. And okay, now, how old am I? Well, I'm honest, I'm 58. How long have I played USCF rated chess? 41 years. Before the Fischer boom of 1972. How long have I played in chess clubs? Go back to 1967. I'm no stranger to this game. And I did recently return after a 16-and-a-half-year absence from over-the-board play, but I was always active in chess. I was heavily competitive in correspondence chess, primarily ICCF, from the period of 1986 to about the year 2000 when I finally burned out on it and got out of it altogether. And then I've dabbled on the internet, various servers since, and now that I've moved to a location where I can get to tournaments more, I want to play more and put into practice some of the theories I've developed. Some of you are aware of my improvement course, which I launched just over a year ago, where you find your strengths and weaknesses and work on them. It's kind of a long story. You can find it on my website, my free lessons program. But anyway, that was conceived back in 1996, intended to be a book, How to Become a Chess Master, and I basically had no capabilities to write it. I didn't own a computer at the time, and was busy working 2 jobs in order to live in Paradise, Laguna Beach, California. So it was always on the back burner, and finally a year and a half ago I said, I got to get this thing going. It's now or never, and so I launched it in video form, and we're taking it to the airways. But the program essentially helps you find what you're doing wrong in your game and correcting it. And it was originally intended for me. What was wrong with my game? I mean, I achieved national master status in 1981, and I bounced between 2100 and 2250 for the next 10 years. Finally got over 2300, and then I had a floor of 2200 imposed, and for the next 5-6 years I'd bounced from 2200 to 2270. You can see that on my rating history. I'm not hiding anything, and I would never go below 2200, but a little erratic. And now that I've returned, it's allowed to go under 2200, and I've been able to maintain it up near 2200 ever since. And I just recently completed my first tournament with a long time control, although I only played 2 games under that because I entered late, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But let's come back to what, like Jeremy Silman says, chess and aging. What about the old guys? Well, we're experienced, and honestly, I don't consider myself old. You're old if you're laying in bed with tubes attached to your arms to feed you, and you need assistance to go to the restroom. That's old. I mean, look at John McCain, well over 70, and he ran for president. That's not old. That's young. You're only as old as you feel. And it's really interesting. I'm going to direct this attention to one person at another server who was launching personal attacks against me, telling me I was overrated and blah blah blah. I mean, he's just letting me have it. And he's my inspiration. I'm just going to get better. And I want to thank you, Mr. You Know Who You Are, because you don't know nothing, and I do. Anyway, it's on record. I don't know what they put in the water in Tennessee, cough cough, but you know who you are, and you know nothing. But anyway, I'm just having a ball with chess, and here to share my knowledge with the world. But anyway, coming back to this particular game, this was played in the Western Pacific Open, I guess, in LAX. That's LA Airport. And after I played in this, I really realized why I didn't like going out there. It's just so darn far. But what can you do? I was happy to play. And this game was actually played under a game 75 because I was a late entry. I didn't. It was a 3-day event. I didn't want to play 5 long games and have to make a over 100-mile round trip 3 days in a row. So I played 2 games and then took a bye in round 3, and then came back and finished up Sunday. But anyway, let's get to this. Okay, I played knight f3 and he played knight c6, and this is a very interesting move, and I'm happy to play this. If black would like to go into Qgoran defense, that's fine with me. So I was accustomed to playing this opening. I selected playing it in 1986 when I got into correspondence chess, and correspondence chess is the perfect way to learn an opening because you can look it up as you go, and you really learn it when it counts. Okay, this is something I teach in my course. And I had run into this position from the black side countless times, and I've tried just about every line. And let's just talk a little bit about the Qgoran defense before we go into it. It was named after its inventor, Mikhail Qgoran. The Russian, the Soviets acknowledged him as the founder of the Soviet School of Chess. But anyway, a lot of critics at the time didn't like this move knight c6 because it blocked black's c-pawn. And they put it down, and it is a drawback. But in recent times, Grandmaster Alexander Morozovich has taken up the Qgoran defense. So right there, it shows us that this thing has some worth to it, and it's not necessarily an opening recommended for a new player. But if you're an experienced player and can learn to play it and know the variations and the ideas and the themes, and all those are beyond the scope of this video, it's a perfectly good opening, and if you lose with it, you won't lose because of the opening unless you just misplay it. And theory has shown a lot of ways that white has cracked this thing wide open, and those are all beyond the scope of this. But anyone that wants to use this, don't worry about blocking your c pawn if you know the opening. This opening is rock solid, and but if you're a new and inexperienced player, it might give you some trouble. You've got to be very careful with it. But anyway. This is one of the main lines of the Qgoran, and where black plays bishop g4, and I'm not going to go into all the various lines, but here we reach a divergence. Now black has to be willing to part with, is willing to part now with one bishop, and black will often part with both bishops. Now I played another line. I'm just going to show you this and then come back to it. I don't play this line as white. I've had this position many times as black, but let me just show you one possible line. It's not the only line, just to give you the idea of it. Okay, e3, then black tries to bust open the center. Oops, pick up the knight here. Black ends up parting with both bishops very quickly. Okay, now again, this isn't the only line, and it's beyond the scope. But one thing that happens is that black has achieved some development in exchange for white securing the bishop pair. And theoretically, this game's about a toss-up, and discussing it is beyond the scope of this video. But this just shows you one of the strategic ideas that black will attempt for. He'll have rapid deployment of his pieces. He's getting ready to castle, and depends on how white continues, which side black actually does castle. But you can see black has a lead in development. White still has to develop his king bishop and his queen and get castled. And many times white doesn't even castle in this opening. But again, the discussion of this is beyond the scope of this video. But anyway, what I play is a line that I've had played against me a number of times, and I know it. It's safe and sound, and white gets developed as a result. But now the bishop comes back and is able to save itself, and black doesn't part with the bishop pair. But white gets developed. And let me continue here. This is all main line. Now black plays bishop b4, which puts a threat on the pawn on e4. So white needs to stop and secure that. And here's an interesting move by black. You know, black's getting some decent play here. Now the purpose of queen h4 is to create a weakness at f3. Okay, and here it is. Okay, now this ties down, at least for the moment, the white queen. The white queen can't run too easily because f3 may fall. Okay, so I've had this position as black countless times in both correspondence games and even some blitz games, which I don't count so much, but I've got some experience with it. And I don't remember all the lines, but I just sat there and knew the basic concepts, and here I'll show them to you. I played bishop e3. This helps to secure d4. And now black castles, and black does have an active game, even though white didn't go grab the bishop here. Black has a reasonable game. White has to be careful about e3. He's got to watch out for pins along this file. Now, a strategy black often employs is voluntarily brings the bishop back a5 into b6. So if white stops and plays a3, he's just wasting a move, because if black knows what he's doing, he's going to do that anyway, and you've just helped him on his way. And the purpose of putting the bishop on b6 is to put more pressure on the d4 square. So one thing I do know is that, I don't remember all the lines, and those aren't important, is that this f3 square needs to be covered. So I went ahead and played bishop g2. And now bishop c5. I guess that's been played before, but it kind of caught me by surprise because I'm more used to this plan. But here he's getting on the file, on the diagonal in one move. It's pinned. I can't take it. But I'm able to break the pin, and black would have to give up the exchange with, like, say, queen takes, and then after pawn takes, rook takes, check, and then he'll get this bishop back. But I don't think black has enough compensation for the exchange. So my opponent played his queen here, and now it's time to get developed, get castled. And essentially the game's dynamically about even. What black does is black kind of selects an incorrect strategy. Black needs to develop, okay? You always need to develop your pieces first. Black tries to launch his own attack just a little too early. He's launching it before he's developed. And the common sense move is just to play knight e7, okay? But instead he plays g5. And like I say, he's wanting to start a pawn storm against my king, but it's too early. And now I play knight e4. Now I've got a threat on this bishop. So now he parts with the bishop pair, and I get a tempo on the queen. And again, him taking on e5 is going to give up the exchange. I don't think he has enough for it. And now, lo and behold, my queen is free, and there's an attack on this bishop. So again, this is played at a time control of game 75 with a delay 5. There may have been better moves available here and there, but I'm going to try to shift my rooks over to the queen side and advance my queen side pawns, just like he's trying to advance his king side pawns, and that's what he does. So now I think it's time to break in the center. And again, this knight is not developed yet. It's one of his problems. This rook technically is becoming developed simply because he's trying to open up the h-file, but black hasn't completed his development yet, so he's gone about this a little too quick. And now he's stops and takes my bishop on f2, and I take back. Now I've got a threat on a7, so he has to spend a tempo to cover that. And now I'm getting my rooks into play, and he doesn't really come up with the best defense here. What all the possible defenses are beyond the scope of this. I just want to get to one point here. And now d6 seems to beg to be played. I think rook takes c7 was actually possible, but I didn't consider it. But this is strong too. There's alternative ways to play this. And his queen comes up, and I just want to get to the key position here to make the point I had in this game. Okay, knight h6. Now, there was my screen. It's back. Okay, my rook's under attack. Now, this is the interesting point that I want to relate this with chess and aging. White to play and do the best he can. You might want to pause the video. Okay, now I'll discuss it when you come back. Okay, you've unpaused the video. You've had a look at it. Before I show what's happening, let's talk about a couple things here. And since the topic is, aside from the Jagoran defense, is chess and aging, I'm 58. My opponent is 60, so we're both kind of in the same boat. And I've seen a lot of players in my age range, plus and minus 10 years, that I knew 16, 20 years ago, that suddenly their ratings have fallen. and they're no longer, and you'll see in the next game, they're no longer as high as they once were. And even players over the age of 65, a lot of them have declined in rating. And I'm the kind of guy that beats a dead horse. If you really know my personality, I'm very motivated and very driven for criticism, because I'll go out and prove you wrong. Much like I'm doing so with my little nut friend from Tennessee. I refuse to accept any other outcome that I'm going to get better. And I think from the way I've played in these games that I've played, 25, 30 games I've played since I returned to over-the-board chess, in a lot of them I'm seeing things that I wouldn't see when I was playing 16, 17 years ago. And a lot of this is due to my endeavors in international correspondence chess. I mean, I got into the World Championship cycle in ICCF. I didn't go any farther than the semifinals, but I got to play a lot of quality players and get into some intense struggles, and I would spend hours on a move. And even when it wasn't my move, when I was waiting for the cards to come in the mail, yeah, we play by postcard, it's a much better way, I would just analyze these things over and over and over and try to find the best moves. And my planning went up as a result. My ability to visualize things and concepts got better. My opening knowledge got better. I mean, correspondence chess is just win-win across the board. It teaches you so much. And I'll say it again, if not for correspondence chess back in the 80s, I never would have, when I first got into it, I never would have made a national master in 1981. It never would have happened. Maybe it would have happened under its own way years later, but it's a valuable thing, and I'm going to be presenting more methods on how it will improve your game, but they're beyond the scope of this video. Okay, so coming back to this, one of my weaknesses is, strangely enough, sometimes can be tactics. Now, I'm quite capable of seeing forced mates and tactics, but sometimes you stare at something right there, it's right there looking at you in the face, and you can't figure it all out. And I play kind of a strategic game where if I have a small advantage on you, I'll just squeeze you to death like a python encircles its prey and crushes it. But here there's a tactical knockout. And now I see the correct move to play right away, but I had trouble sorting it out. It took me about 10-15 minutes to work it all out. Now, this is not an uncommon thing. It's not due to age or being tired. Now, for instance, number one, I was well rested when I played this game. I had plenty of sleep the night before. I've only played chess for 3 hours before this game. But sometimes, and this is something that's true over my entire chess career, even when I was back in my teens and in my 20s, I remember sometimes I could sit and have a position in front of me, and I couldn't analyze it for the life of me. I could look at one move and, what's the next move? What do I do now? I just have to go back and start over and try to solve it. Now, is that what's causing that? Well, sometimes it's just not. I'm lacking the right approach. I have to sit down and discipline myself, and I found some ways to do it. But here I was gravitating back to one of my old habits, and we do play chess like we always do. We have to correct things. Like I give examples to people. Sign your name on a piece of paper, then set it aside, sign it again. Do this all day, every hour. Then go back and compare the signatures. Well, they're all going to look the same. Your handwriting is the same. The way you play chess is the same. You just have different positions. So that's the variable. But certain times you're going to be fresher and more ready to play than others. So unless you can correct some of these deficiencies in your own game, you're going to hit a peak and kind of be stuck there. Well, I'm working on ways to get around the peak so anybody can improve, because I believe everybody can improve, and I stand by that statement. And that's what my program does. It teaches you how to improve. So in my case, what I have to do is if I realize I have trouble analyzing, what I needed to do was just get up and walk around. Well, instead, I sat there until I figured it out. Now, the first move is blatantly obvious. Okay, if you have any kind of a tactical insight, the first instinct is to do this check, and there's the key move. If you found that, you're winning. Okay, and now here's where I was having trouble looking at that position from the beginning. I kept wanting to play Queen C6 check, and all I can do is he goes back to B8 and Queen C7 check and King A8. And I have a draw if I want it, but I wasn't exactly sure how to finish this off. Let's just have a look at it, and I'll show you. This is not the right move, but I kept going back to this move and trying to make it work in my mind, and we'll just show you in a to clarify it. Now, how do I improve my position? I'm down a rook. Okay, well that's all right. Is it? Well, he's threatening to take this. Maybe it's not all right. Well, he's not really threatening to take it. I can get E5 check in if his queen takes it. But I'm thinking, how do I get my rook into play? And you know, if I put the rook on C4, I'm trying to make this work. You know, what are his defenses? The idea is to put the rook here. It's just a long, laborious process. And then I'm thinking, well, what about moves like A5? Well, to stop the rook there, well, I can grab it with the queen. I mean, it just got complicated, and I couldn't. I was having trouble trying to find a way to continue this position if it was played, and I couldn't see it. And like I say, it took me forever from going back to this position to find the correct follow-up. And eventually, just through process of elimination, I found it. Now, you get these whiz kids that got these 2400 blitz ratings. I mean, they see these things in an instant. And, you know, that's one reason why I don't play blitz at chess.com. I don't play well at it. I played it over at the other server. I don't play well at it because I tend to make tactical mistakes in my slow, deliberate positional style. And suddenly an advantage turns into a quick loss. Blitz is not a measure of your strength, unlike our clown from Tennessee thinks. Blitz leads to impulsive play and just is not good for you if you're learning blitz. It's better to play blitz once you're established at what your peak is, then you can go in and play it. But like I said, I had trouble finding it, and finally, just through brute force and patience, I had time on the clock, I found the solution, and here I'll show it to you. After king takes, the key move is to play rook c7 check, and this forces a mate rather quickly. If he goes back to b8 or a8, it's mate in one. That leaves one other legal move, and then this becomes relatively easy to see. Now, once again, I have several ways to do this, but to force a mate, but I chose this way. It's easy to see. It leaves one legal move, and then he comes out, and then I make another move which leaves him one legal move, and he comes here, and now checkmate. So this wasn't a case of age had me down. Like I say, I had trouble sometimes analyzing games back when I was 21 years old. It might have to do with the big meal I had at lunch shortly before this. You have to be careful about your diet when you eat. Sometimes when your body is digesting a large meal, it takes blood cells out of your brain and puts them in your stomach. This could have been one of the reasons I couldn't analyze. I don't know, but needless to say, I did eventually find it when I had to, and what I want to do is move on to the next game. But before I move on to the next game, I just want to show something a little different here, just to give you an idea about an opening strategy. Because it becomes important. It's something called the minority attack, and I've discussed this in a number of my videos for Team 45-45 League. I just want to show the basic idea of it. Okay, let's get down to it. This goes here. I mean, I'm not sure the correct order. I think you take on d5 before he has the option to take here, but that's not important. Basically, this is all I need to show the position. What white wants to do is advance his pawns on the queen side. You want to get a pawn to b5. Now, I knew this back when I was unrated. The idea is that if black takes on b5 with his pawn, his d5 pawn will be isolated and weak. That means it's a target. One weakness down, one to go, and you got a winning ending. And if black doesn't take, then white takes on c6, and either black will get the isolated d pawn, or if he takes back with the pawn, he'll have a backward pawn on the open file. And that's the minority attack in a nutshell. So what's black supposed to do about this? Well, if you know anything about chess, black's supposed to Black's supposed to start his own minority attack, and the principles apply. You're not ready for it now, but eventually Black will play for f4, and the same principles apply. If White takes on f4, his d4 pawn is isolated. If Black doesn't, or White doesn't take on f4, then Black will capture on e3 and either give White an isolated pawn on d4 or a backward pawn on the open file. Okay, so some people aren't familiar with this strategy. It's going to come up in my next game, and there's other openings this happens, and sometimes I like the Qa4 exchange variation, and then suddenly it's Black that has the white pawn structure, and White that has the black pawn structure, and they're both supposed to go about their businesses and do these things. And when one side doesn't do what theory dictates they should do, they can get in trouble. Because the other side will implement their plan and achieve their aim. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the other game, and this was played the next day. Now this was played at the full time control of 40-2, sudden death 1 hour, and delay of 5. Now this is a big difference. This is real true chess. Okay, let's get this game up, and I had Black. His rating is, I forgot to put his rating in there. Let me do that. I just want it there. It's easy enough. I think it was 2085, I think, or somewhere around there. I just wanted to show up in the window. Easy to fix. Watch this. See? Okay. There we go. Interesting thing. This gentleman is 2 years younger than I hadn't seen him in years, and as I recall, he used to always have, let me move up one move just to get rid of those arrows. We were always close in rating. At one time he had a national master rating, and this was the first time we played, although I've seen him at tournaments for over 30 years. Was the first time we played. Usually I can't even count the times I'd be at a tournament where he was, and his rating would be either right above or right below mine. We'd be on adjacent boards and get to watch each other play. So finally, his rating went down, and there was a chance we could play, because it's hard to play somebody close to your rating in a Swiss tournament, just the way the Swiss pairings work. And this, as I say, this is a game with true time control chess. You know, game 75, that's just not chess. You know. If you play in a club, you're usually going to have time controls of 40 moves in 90 minutes and maybe sudden death in 30 minutes. That's more normal. There's not really many popular time controls on the internet that approach the kind of tournament you're going to be playing in if you play in a real tournament. And going to work on that here a little bit. More on that later. But anyway, since the topic is also chess and aging, you know, one can say, well, hey, he was a master. Look at him. He's down to 2085. And you're headed there, too. You know, the critics would say that. Well, I can't speak for why his rating is 2085. I don't know. But I can speak for what my ability is. And this was one of my better efforts. And as far as what judgment and planning does and strategy. And anyway, let's just see what happens. So, bang, I give him the Qa4 defense, right? That's what the topic is, so you saw that coming. And now White selects one of the slower approaches. There's nothing wrong with it at all. Now, an interesting line is e5. And I've actually won a couple blitz games in about 10 moves with this. They're in my library over at ICC if you want to look for them. It's kind of hysterical. What happens, and I'm not going to go into it, eventually this knight disappears, the queens come off the board, the d file opens up, and the rook on d8 administers a mate on d1. But e5 is great for blitz, but for slow chess it's a little risky. E5 allows queen b3, and you really have to know this line if you're going to play it. And I didn't know if he knew the line, and I didn't necessarily remember all the analysis. I just played the slow, solid, deliberate move e6. Whoops. Look at that. Isn't that clever how that happens? It's something with this chess.com interface. It moves pieces where they don't belong. There's no black pawn on d3. Okay, how do we fix that? Let's get it fixed. Well, it's fixed if we flip the board. Let's flip it back. Hey, look, it's fixed. Okay. All right, hopefully we don't have that problem again. All right, so I don't know what point we leave book, but all I know is I need to develop. And actually, I'm going to discuss some reasons why the critics will say don't block the C pawn. We'll see some ideas behind this. Okay, so now bishop b5, he's pinning. And now I play bishop d6. And he comes up with queen b3. Now, he should probably get castled. So this is a little trick. Now, he's not threatening knight takes d5 necessarily, because I have a tactic, and I'll explain it. Okay, if knight takes d5, it's a blunder because I take back, and now he's down a piece on the board. If he retakes the piece, the bishop comes to b4 check. He's got to get out of check, and then I'm able to win his queen because nothing's guarding the queen. But you can't expect your opponent to fall into that. I've seen it happen, but you can't expect it. Naturally, they're going to find a move to avoid it. And he comes bishop to d2. Now, here's one of the interesting parts of this opening. It's common that, like I say, when black's c-pawn is moved, what black would like to do is now get it up to c6. But in order to get it to c6, you have to move that knight. And one of the drawbacks with moving the knight is that you can give away some control of the e5 square, which I now do. But by doing this, I'm getting ready to play c6, which is thematic in this type opening. Now, could he play knight e5 here? I don't recall exactly what I had in mind for it, but I wasn't too worried about it, because either I can retreat my bishop to h5 or f5, and then I'm going to be able to play c6 here in a moment. But that's all beyond the scope of what I'm trying to achieve here. But it's somewhat aided by the fact that I have my development complete. All my minor pieces are out. I've castled. Just need to move the queen. So I'm not too worried about a knight e5 in this position. And he possibly didn't want double pawns, but he elected to retreat his bishop, uncovering an attack on c7. And now comes a critical choice in my strategy. What I need development. Okay, I got to get my queen out. I can put the queen on d7, but I would like to put the queen on b6, and I'll explain why I want the queen on b6 in a little bit. There's a little clue. It has to do with what I showed you about the minority attack. Okay, so I come up with an interesting idea, offer a pawn, and it's many times thematic in this opening that black will gambit that b7 pawn, and it's really risky for white to take. I'll just give you an example. In black's going to gambit two pawns. Okay, now by doing this white queen's a little bit out of play. White has a pass pawn, but black's getting active. Now this isn't the only line, but interesting here, white cannot castle, because then black will play bishop takes f3 and removing the defender of the bishop on d2. And for instance, if I move like rook b8, I could play here. And like I say, I'm down a pawn, but I've got plenty of activity here. Black should be fine. And as black, you're trying to equalize first. You can't play for the win until you've equalized. And here black has an active game. Like in the previous game, black played too quickly for the win. Okay, so as much as we'd love to win every game, playing with black's a little tougher. You have to admit to yourself that you can't try for the win until you equalize first, unless you're playing something, some counter gambit or something where you're going for the initiative right on the first move. But let's back up. He didn't elect to take the pawn, so and that's fine with me. Instead, he played h3, and here's the point where I think my chess got really interesting, and as far as my level of thinking goes. Well, one thing is, if this bishop leaves this diagonal, the 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 threat, like for instance, if I put the bishop on f5, which looks like a great square, just to give you an example, in the line where he plays queen takes b7 and I do the rook b8 line, and my rook ends up on b2, that's a position where white can castle because I no longer have bishop takes f3, removing the defender of the bishop d2. So I'm not in the least bit worried about this queen taking this pawn. But if I thought about this is kind of interesting. This does weaken his king side a little bit, and that's going to come into play later. But let's just take stock of the situation. What is white really threatening here? And the answer is nothing. Black's position has no weakness. The only weak square is b7. I come up with this totally unique move, bishop c8. Now, how many people would play that? Now, even though I'm not worried about him taking on b7, I've just stopped it right there. Okay, it's out of the equation. And now I've gone into a position a tempo and a half behind. Okay, and I've done it willingly. I could have put the bishop on f5, and he probably would have castled. I could have, but I just ended the debate and went for what I was going for, and it's all fine. It's because even though white's a tempo and a half in development, white can't do anything with it. Okay, so the tempo and a half is that my queen bishop and my queen are not developed. His queen bishop and his queen are developed. But this is all according to the strategy that I have planned. And now I play queen b6. And this is an interesting thing that comes up in a lot of games. Maybe you're familiar with it and you've seen it. It's kind of like what we call a Mexican standoff between the two queens. Which one's going to take? Sometimes neither one wants to take. One drawback with taking is you open up a file for your opponent's rook. Okay, so that's one reason why neither side wants to take. But so he didn't want to take. He didn't want to open up my file. But maybe he should have, and you'll see why in a moment. Okay, so now, like I say, I make the move that people, like I say, don't want to make, because there's a perfectly logical reason for it. And this is not a black to play and win situation. It's black to play and do the best he can. And I'll have you pause the video and see if you can find it. Okay, you've come back. Now, one more clue if you just couldn't find it, or if it'll help you understand. It's why I showed what I showed before this about the minority attack. I took his queen off. I'm willing to do this because what this has done is it has totally stunted his minority attack against me. I'm going to stop that thing cold. It's not coming. Okay? It's that simple. Whereas I, in turn, can still get my minority attack in. Now, so here I am on move 13, and I've got something to play for. I've got a strategy. I know exactly what I'm doing. I've got a plan, and I'm going to follow that plan for the rest of the game. Now, anyone that looks at this game and sees it will know that I have not declined in strength of chess, and if you don't, if you want to consider me 2200, you can decide for yourself if this is the understanding of 2400 or not that I claim I have. I'll leave that to debate, and maybe I can prove it by getting my rating, working my rating up there. But to my little nutcase friend in Tennessee, another nail in your coffin here. Thanks for the motivation. Anyway, back to this. Like I say, I've shut him down. But it's going to require a great deal of maneuvering to achieve my plan here. Let's see how it turns out. So what do? It's black to play. Well, I just return the bishop back into the line of fire, and it's ready to develop. Also, what's kind of neat, at some point this rook can swing over, and if I need to cover b7, this bishop can come back again. That's fine with me. Now, another thing, too, that's interesting about this, you get into games, you look at good bishops and bad bishops. One could say that black's good bishop is the one on d6, and white's bad bishop is the dark squared one, its counterpart, because that bishop's behind a bunch of pawns, and this one has freedom around the pawns. But actually, both in this position, both of black's bishops are better. Okay? Both of them are better because my counterpart here, my light squared, is outside the pawn chain. And even though these pawns are potential targets to this bishop, they're not targets for a long time, if ever at all, because this white squared bishop on e2 is going to have to get to c8 to attack him. Okay, so black actually has the better bishops in this position. It's not much of an advantage; it's a slight advantage. It's white has a pair of double pawns. This pawn is potentially a weakness. If this rook wasn't on c1, black would have a move. Might have a move like bishop c2 attacking it. So the game essentially is still even, but black has plans. And it's the kind of thing a chess engine won't understand, because the chess engine cannot see 20 moves ahead. The prospects are better for black here simply because black has the f4 break, okay, and white doesn't have the b5 break. So let's see how the game turns out. Okay, so he just goes through the natural motion. He wants to occupy the c5 square with his knight, but this vacates e4, so I bring a knight in. Now he wants to preserve his bishop. I don't know if I necessarily want to take it if he leaves it there, but I might. I'd have to evaluate it. He came back, and now I get this knight in g6 in. Now again, here's some drawbacks about blocking the c pawn. Since that knight goes to c6, it's usually going to d7, and it doesn't always get to the squares you want it to go to. A lot of times it's more used to going to f6. On g6, sometimes it's a little clumsy, but actually it fits this minority attack strategy perfect, because it's supporting the pawn getting this pawn getting to f4. Okay, but there are some potential drawbacks to having this knight on g6, and I'll point them out when we get there. But white continues with his ideas. He realizes he has a set of double pawns, and he wants to do his minority attack. So, boom, I just stop it. And as I said, it was stopped. Now it's just stopped for good. Now, this is true. It weakens the b6 square, but that's not a square that he can really utilize. So he goes forward with knight c5. And now I'm quite willing to undouble his pawns, and I just drop the bishop back. And he offers to trade his bad bishop, and I don't mind. I don't mind at all. I still think black has the better bishop here. So what has white accomplished in the last several moves? Well, he's gotten rid of his double pawn, and he's gotten rid of his theoretically bad bishop, but his bishop isn't doing him much good at all. His bishop is not going to, it has no entry squares, and mine is pressuring some squares. Okay, so now I follow through with the plan I mentioned earlier, get this rook into play. It belongs on the king's side because I want to do a minority attack. And now he kind of goes through some maneuvering. And what he wants to do is attack b7. So I just carefully overprotect my position. And his next move kind of explains why he did it. What black would or white would like to play at some point is g3 to stop this minority attack cold. But the problem would be the pawn on h3 would hang. And so again my strategy comes into play. How do I proceed here? And one of the ideas, like I said earlier, was bringing this bishop back to c8. I said there were some potential problems with this and with the knight being placed on h6. One is that when I play f5, now my bishop's totally imprisoned. Okay, and although I can get it out with f4, but he's getting ready to play g3, and I need to work on that. So my next move explains how I'm going to work on that. I play h5, and I'm getting ready. If need be, I'm going to be playing h4. Okay, and try to create some kind of weakness, other weakness in the black camp or white pawn camp. Okay, so he doesn't try g3 here. He goes and gets ready to attack my pawn, and now naturally I play h4. And the whole purpose of h5 and h4 scene, the moment he plays g3, I'm going to make an exchange, and the minority attack objective will be met without actually playing the minority attack. I'll have created a weakness on e3. one weakness, now I got to go find another, but at least I'll have the winning chances. What more can you ask for with black when you have the winning chances? Okay, so rook c3, and now I just make another careful preparatory move. I play f6. This just takes a couple potential squares away from his knight that I may not want him going to. Okay, it also gets ready to play rook f8 to f7 to batten down the hatches on the pawn on b7. So at this point he decides he wants to trade the bishops, and even though my bishop's better, I pretty much have to. And here's one of the drawbacks with advancing that f-pawn. If I retreat the bishop, I drop the knight on g6. And there was something that was possible even in the, with my h-pawn up, in the positions where the bishop comes back to f8 and then I play f5. I couldn't play f4 because something's going to hang. I'd have to prepare that. So I don't mind trading bishops. And now I just simply overprotect b7. And here we are. Move 27, I have not started my minority attack yet. Interesting. I've had this strategy ever since I traded queens on what? Move 13. And I'm not there yet. So it's taking a lot of work to get there. But it's all planned. And now he plays rook from d to b3. Okay, now he's tying my rooks down. Okay, so theoretically, you could say the white rooks are better, but how do they improve their position? You know, if anything, I've held equality here. So what do I need to do? Well, I can just sit and repeat the position, but that's no fun. I do recognize that white could try, and does try, rook to b6, followed by rook from b3 to b4, followed by knight to d2, knight to b3, and knight to a5, putting a third attacker on this guy. How do I cover that? Well, I can shove the king over there, but then how do I... it's kind of hard to see how to continue this minority attack. His knight is tying my pawn down to h4, or my knight down to defending the pawn on h4. Okay? So even though I think black has the strategic play here, white's got black a little tied down. But that's easy to fix. And this is where I say the high strategy, senior master and above strategy comes up. I send my king to h5 to secure the h4 pawn so that my knight is free. It's that simple. There's no hurry. I can play f5, f4 later. It's coming. King h6. Now rook b4. Now king h5. Now my knight's free. And now he sets it free, and he forces me to do what I do. His knight's headed for a5. So I got to redeploy my knight. And, well, look at that. It did it again. That knight's supposed to be on e6. Okay, let's try flipping the board and going one move forward and flip it back. Maybe that'll fix it. Okay, so far so good. Okay, knight e5 and now knight d8. Now white's about done all he can. What else can white do here? One thing I thought was, well, what if the white king were on a7? He'd have a fourth attacker on the pawn. Well, I don't think his king's going to get there. But white's pretty much spent his load, and there's not much else he can do. And before I play my minority attack, I improve the position of this pawn, and now he retreats. And finally, on move 35, the minority attack is almost there. And black now has the better position no matter how you slice it. Now there are several ways to play this. We're at move 36. I had an extra half hour on my clock. His time was starting to run low. I could have taken with the pawn, that's fine, but so is this. And suddenly I realize I have some serious winning chances. The white king is a little bit in danger here. So I bring the rook back to f6, and he returns his knight to the scene of the crime, and I give a check. Now, if white brings the king up to f2, he's going to get mated in short order. King f2, here I'll show you. King f2, rook e6, and if he tries f4 to give his king a flight square, I just play g4, and he can only stall mate one move, and then this mate is coming, and it's game over. So he needs to run to h2, and I find the right move, rook e6, and now time control is met. Okay, and he spent some time on his move, and I still have like I say, I have probably close to 90 minutes on my clock, and he played here. But once again, I'm still not calculating combinations well. My strategy is impeccable. You can't fault me for my strategy here. There's a right move and a wrong move here. The right move wins, the wrong move draws. I recognize the right move as being the correct move. Once again, just like the last game, I recognized that rook takes b7 check, sacrificing the rook, won the game. But because it's a long drawn out combination, there's all kinds of stuff here. Well, I'll get to it. Let's do it this way. White to play, or black to move and do the best he can. Pause the video. Okay, if you have resumed the video, black basically has two candidate moves. Try to set up a mate with the rooks on the back rank. Okay, if black had three moves in a row here, he'd move a rook over, bring the other rook down, and administer a mate. So the quicker you can do that, the better, right? So the most direct way to do it is to move this rook right now, and this move actually wins. But having to calculate it is long and laborious. You have to recognize you have to sacrifice a knight, and now the threat is mate on the move, and white has but one move. And we look at this afterwards. We both were saying this move. You want to keep the king away from getting checked by the knight, but I believe this only draws. Okay, check, and then let's see, avoid a knight check, and then comes check, and it looks interesting. Black's threatening a mate in two different ways, and if it weren't for this knight, white's the one getting a mate, but unfortunately, it appears to be a draw. White gets a perpetual check, and one of the concerns I was having in this line is that suddenly something like this comes in, and whoops, I've dropped a piece, and it's only a draw. But black had a win here, and it's something that I missed. The win is just simply to play en passant check, or take en passant. Now, if king takes, the winning maneuver is just put the rook here. Now the threat is mate on the move. And how does white defend himself? Well, he's got the king has no move. A rook and a knight move will not help. He's got to move one pawn or the other, and this just doesn't cut it. What's this? I think this is mate right here, isn't it? And that mate, and then on h4 I don't want to take on here first and give him that square. You check here first, and then take here, and there's no defense to this mate. So I was just having trouble solving all this, going back and forth trying to solve it. Now maybe I had plenty of time on the clock. Maybe if I'd taken more, I would have. But one thing I realized, and I knew that I wasn't analyzing well, and for this particular day, my chess wasn't at top form, and that even if I won this game, that I wasn't going to do well in the last round. I kind of knew that. Anything can happen. You don't know, but let me get back forward to where we were. I went too far back. But I looked at this, and I actually concluded that either move won, and I could play the other one, and it was just a lot less complicated. Oops, didn't play that. I took the knight. Now this now becomes a draw, and I'll show you. Okay, I'm just one tempo behind. He gets his check, and now he's on the 7th rank. And this is kind of interesting. I've picked up the pawn. I've cleared e5 for my king, but it's basically a draw. Okay, check. I have to be very careful here. If black heads for e5, he could lose. Like, for instance, king f6 is a big whoops. Suddenly, it's white doing the checkmating. Now, one legal move, and there's a mate for black for white. Whoops. So the only other alternative is to play here. Well, there's another alternative I'll show you in a moment. But after this check, anyway, now I still can't go to e5. I would need to interpose the rook. And after rook takes and king takes and rook c6, I couldn't find any way to play this for a win for black. So I went into the alternative line. I played my king to h6. And then let's see, what did he do? He checked. Whoops. Wrong PGN. This one, king h6. He played rook h7 check. I played here. He checked, and we looked at each other and realized that we were both willing to accept a draw, and then we did. So, I didn't win, but I don't care. I mean, my level of play is not my level of strength is not left. It was a great game. Very enjoyable. I mean, that's what you play chess for. Yeah, you like to win every time, but you're not going to. Yeah, you're going to let winning games go, but my program says work on your mistakes and you can reduce those possibilities. But anyway, the Qa4 defense is safe and solid. You have to know it, and I spent the time and learned it. I don't know. I know other openings. I won't always play this, so I'm not the easiest guy in the world to prepare to play, because you never know what I'm going to throw at you. But not sure when my next major weekend tournament is with long time control, but I look forward to it. And I do want to thank everyone for taking the time to look at this. And hopefully I've taught you something. You learned something. My whole objective is to give back to the chess world for all the many years of pleasure that this game has given me. And my website's linked on the YouTube description. You can find all my videos. There's hundreds of them, and if you're trying to improve your game, start looking at them. I promise you'll learn so much about how a chess master thinks and plans. And I've had too many testimonies from players. One gained 400 rating points in 3 months. I've had too many testimonies from people that love what I do, unlike our clown from Tennessee who said he looked at one and it sucked, naturally had nothing to say why it did. And, I didn't bother arguing with him. So, well, I have 500 people that say it's great. You're going to have to come up with some substance. I just let him make a fool of himself. But anyway, that's immaturity for him, and I'm here to share with the world all I have. And I want to thank you all for taking the time once again. That concludes this video, and I'll write up a blog to go with it and submit it, and there'll be many more blogs to come. Thanks so much for your time. Take care.